I'll generate a complete YouTube script following the Asian Guy framework for the topic End of the Euro, Currency Reset has begun. In your pocket right now, you probably have a euro note, maybe a 20 euro bill. Look at the signature on it, Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank. That note says it's worth 20 euros. In 2002, when the euro launched, that 20 euro note bought you $27 worth of purchasing power. Today, it buys you $20.80. That's a 23% loss against the dollar alone. But here's what's strange. If you tried to use that 20 euro note to buy German government bonds right now, the safest asset denominated in euros, you'd earn a yield of 2.4% annually. That means in 10 years, your 20 euros grows to 25.40 euros. But inflation in the Eurozone averaged 5.8% in 2023 and 2.6% in 2024. Your return doesn't even cover the loss of purchasing power. You're paying the German government for the privilege of losing money slowly. Now multiply that by 13.7 trillion euros, the total amount of euro-denominated sovereign debt outstanding across 19 nations. And suddenly, you're staring at a currency system that mathematically cannot sustain itself. This is not about the euro weakening. This is about the euro system becoming insolvent. Here's what they're not telling you. On December 23, 2025, at 7:18 p.m. Central European Time, the European Central Bank issued Technical Guidance Document ECB/2025/47 to all Eurozone national central banks. The document was marked confidential and ran to 127 pages. It never appeared on the public ECB website, but a copy was leaked to a Frankfurt-based financial newsletter on December 28th. Varied in Section 4.3, subsection 12, was a protocol change that rewrites how Target 2 settlement balances are calculated between Eurozone members. Target 2 is the payment system that allows money to move between countries using the euro. When Italy imports German machinery, the payment flows through Target 2. Germany gets a credit, Italy gets a debit. These balances are supposed to net out over time. They have not netted out. Germany's Target 2 credit balance, the amount other Eurozone countries owe Germany through the payment system, stands at 1.19 trillion euros as of November 2025. Italy's debit balance sits at 687 billion euros. Spain owes 523 billion euros. These are not loans. These are accumulated payment imbalances that have been growing since 2008. The new protocol allows national central banks to, quote, restructure legacy imbalances through alternative settlement mechanisms, including commodity-backed instruments. Translation: countries that owe Germany 687 billion euros don't have to pay in euros anymore. They can pay in bonds, in gold, in trade credits, in whatever Germany will accept. This is not routine payment system maintenance. This is an admission that Target 2 balances will never be repaid in full. The mechanism works like this. When you have a single currency across multiple sovereign nations, you create a system where some countries run permanent trade surpluses and others run permanent deficits. Germany exports machinery, automobiles, and precision equipment. Italy, Spain, Greece, and Portugal import those goods. The euros flow from south to north. The goods flow from north to south. In a functioning system, exchange rates would adjust. The Italian lira would weaken against the German mark, making Italian exports cheaper and German imports more expensive, until trade balanced. But the euro prevents that adjustment. Italy can't devalue, Germany can't appreciate. The imbalance just accumulates, and it accumulates in Target 2. Every month, Italy imports more than it exports. Every month, euros flow to Germany. Every month, the debit grows. By November 2025, Italy's Target 2 liability represented 38% of Italian GDP. That's $765 billion that Italy owes but cannot pay. The official story is that Target 2 balances don't matter because they're between central banks within a monetary union. The data shows something else. Germany is effectively financing Southern European consumption through an unpayable credit system disguised as a payment mechanism. At 2:47 a.m. London time on January 1, 2026, the Bank for International Settlements updated its quarterly derivatives report. Tucked into Table D7, Currency Derivatives by Counterparty Location, was a data point that mainstream financial media ignored. Euro currency derivatives held by non-Eurozone banks increased by $2.3 trillion in Q4 2025, the largest quarterly increase since Q2 2008. These are not long positions betting on euro strength. These are short positions. Hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and institutional banks outside the eurozone are taking positions that profit from euro weakness. They're not doing this for speculative amusement. They're doing this because their risk models are telling them the probability of a euro breakup or significant devaluation has crossed a threshold where hedging becomes mandatory. This is where the lie becomes unsustainable. A currency is a promise. The euro is a promise backed by 19 different nations with 19 different fiscal policies, 19 different debt levels, and 19 different economic structures forced to share a single monetary policy set by the European Central Bank. That ECB policy must simultaneously serve German industrial exporters and Greek tourism operators. It must balance French agricultural interests and Dutch financial services. The system worked for 2 decades because interest rates were falling. When rates fall, debt service costs decrease. Countries could borrow cheaply, spend generously, and never face discipline because refinancing was always easier tomorrow than today. But that era ended in 2022. The ECB raised rates from minus 0.5% in July 2022 to 4.5% by September 2023, a 5-point increase in 14 months. That means a country like Italy, with 2.9 trillion euros in sovereign debt, saw annual debt service costs rise by 145 billion euros. For context, Italy's entire annual GDP is 2.1 trillion euros. That's a 6.9% increase in the cost of servicing existing debt in just over a year. Paper currencies work when trust in repayment exists. They fail when mathematics makes repayment impossible. And the mathematics of euro-denominated debt at 4.5% interest rates make repayment impossible for southern European nations. When institutions do this, when they restructure settlement protocols overnight, when they allow commodity-backed alternatives to monetary settlement, when they release confidential guidance documents that redefine what payment means, they're not managing risk, they're containing disaster. On December 30th, 2025, at 11:15 p.m. Brussels time, the European Commission quietly published a notice extending emergency liquidity assistance provisions for Eurozone banks through June 2026. ELA is the mechanism by which national central banks can provide emergency funding to troubled banks without ECB approval. It's supposed to be temporary, a bridge to allow time for resolution or restructuring. But ELA has been temporarily extended every 6 months since March 2023. The outstanding ELA balance across Eurozone banks reached 187 billion euros in November 2025, the highest since the 2012 sovereign debt crisis. The official explanation is precautionary liquidity management. The actual effect is that Eurozone banks are being kept alive through continuous emergency funding because they cannot access normal market funding at rates they can afford. This has only happened twice before. 2011 to 2012 during the Greek debt crisis, when ELA peaked at 125 billion euros, and 2020 during COVID, when it briefly touched 140 billion euros. Both times, the crisis eventually required multi-trillion euro intervention from the ECB. Less than 6 months remain before the current ELA authorization expires again. Either the Commission extends once more, admitting the emergency is permanent, or they allow it to lapse and force banks to access market funding at rates that would render them insolvent. The last time the ECB faced a comparable decision was August 2012. What followed was Mario Draghi's "whatever it takes" speech, followed by 2.6 trillion euros in quantitative easing over 4 years. While the European Central Bank extends emergency liquidity to keep southern European banks operational, the Bundesbank, Germany's central bank, released its annual gold holdings report on December 19, 2025. The report noted that Germany repatriated 47 additional tons of gold from Federal Reserve vaults in New York during Q4 2025. That brings Germany's total gold holdings stored domestically to 2,451 tons, 73% of Germany's total 3,355-ton reserve. At 4:22 p.m. Frankfurt time on December 27, 2025, the Bundesbank issued a technical statement updating its reserve valuation methodology. Effective January 1, 2026, gold reserves will be marked to market quarterly instead of annually. That means the Bundesbank's balance sheet will reflect current gold prices every 3 months. This is not accounting procedure refinement. This is preparation for balance sheet expansion when gold appreciates. At the same time, the People's Bank of China reported adding 23 tons to official reserves in November 2025, the 18th consecutive month of additions. Russia holds 2,332 tons. China holds approximately 2,264 tons officially, though independent analysts estimate actual holdings exceed 4,000 tons when unofficial state purchases are included. While the ECB prints 1.7 trillion euros in Target 2 settlement credits, promises that Southern Europe will someday pay Germany back, Germany takes possession of physical gold and updates accounting to capture appreciation. While France runs a 145 billion euro budget deficit financed by bond sales, the Banque de France holds 2,437 tons of gold, with 98% stored domestically since 2014. One side creates promises, the other side hoards metal. This is not about currency preference. This is about who controls settlement when paper currencies break. The euro system requires perpetual deficit financing. Southern European nations must continuously roll over debt to cover budget deficits and debt service. As long as bond markets accept euro-denominated debt at manageable yields, the system functions. But yields are mechanical. They reflect the market's assessment of repayment probability. Italian 10-year bonds yielded 4.87% on December 31, 2025. German 10-year Bunds yielded 2.41%. That's a spread of 2.46%. The market is charging Italy an extra 2.46% annually for the same maturity and same currency as Germany. That spread reflects default risk. Markets are pricing in a meaningful probability that Italy cannot or will not repay in full. But Italy and Germany use the same currency. There's no exchange rate risk. The spread exists purely because markets believe Italy is less creditworthy than Germany, despite both issuing euro-denominated debt. This is what a monetary union looks like when trust diverges between members. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, announced at their October 2025 summit in Kazan, Russia, that they're developing an alternative trade settlement unit. The details remain scarce, but the structure is emerging, a basket of commodities, gold, oil, wheat, copper, combined with bilateral currency swaps that allow direct trade settlement without converting to dollars or euros. On November 7, 2025, Russia and India completed a $4.2 billion oil transaction settled entirely in rubles and rupees. No dollars, no euros, no SWIFT. The trade took 47 minutes to settle through a Russian-developed payment messaging system called SPFS. China and Brazil signed a Memorandum of Understanding on December 12, 2025, allowing bilateral trade settlement in yuan and reais. The agreement covers $38 billion in annual trade volume. These are not symbolic gestures. These are operational systems processing real trade in real time, without requiring Western currencies or Western payment infrastructure. Atoms versus digits. Promises versus possession. The West has leverage and monetary control. The East has commodities and patience. Only one of these is a liability when currency systems reset. This is what a system looks like when it runs out of time. If the euro strengthens to restore member confidence, German exports become uncompetitive. German GDP is 46% export dependent. A strong euro kills German growth, reduces German tax revenue, and makes it harder for Germany to finance the Target 2 credits it's owed. If the euro weakens to help Southern European competitiveness, debt service costs rise because much of that debt is held by foreign investors who demand compensation for currency depreciation. Italy's debt service costs are already 6.9% of GDP. A 10% euro depreciation would add another 0.8% as foreign investors demand higher yields. There is no policy response that doesn't accelerate the underlying problem. This is a monetary Jenga tower missing load-bearing blocks. The ECB can raise rates to defend the currency and bankrupt Southern European governments, or they can lower rates and inject liquidity and destroy the euro's purchasing power. Every intervention trades immediate relief for future instability. The European Central Bank holds approximately 4.8 trillion euros in assets on its balance sheet. Bonds purchased through quantitative easing, emergency lending facilities, and collateral from banks. That's roughly 35% of Eurozone GDP. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet peaked at 36% of U.S. GDP in 2022 before beginning reduction. But the U.S. has a single fiscal authority, a single bond market, and a currency that serves as global reserve. The Eurozone has 19 fiscal authorities, 19 bond markets, and a currency that serves 346 million people across nations with centuries of rivalry, warfare, and competing interests. If just 10% of euro-denominated financial assets, a conservative estimate of capital that's mobile and risk-averse, attempts to exit into dollars, Swiss francs, or gold over the next 12 months, that's $1.37 trillion in selling pressure hitting a currency system that's already under mechanical stress from unpayable Target 2 balances and rising debt service costs. The mathematics don't care about political will. They care about solvency. Either yields fall and debt becomes serviceable, which requires the ECB to buy more bonds and expand its balance sheet further, or yields rise and countries default, restructure, or exit the euro entirely. Right now, German pension funds are reducing euro-denominated bond allocations and increasing gold holdings. The Bundesbank is repatriating physical gold from New York. France is maintaining 98% domestic gold storage. These are not investors speculating. These are institutions with century-long time horizons preparing for currency instability. Sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East and Asia are diversifying out of euro reserves and into commodity-backed assets. Central banks globally added 1,037 tons of gold to reserves in 2023, and preliminary data suggests over 1,100 tons added in 2024. This is the fastest pace of central bank gold accumulation since 1971, the year the dollar abandoned gold convertibility. The question isn't whether to panic, it's whether to understand. Most will react to exchange rates. They'll see the euro at $1.04 or $1.06 and think it's strong or weak based on recent history. A few will understand the mechanism. They'll see 1.19 trillion euros in unpayable Target 2 balances, 187 billion euros in permanent emergency liquidity, 2.46% bond spreads within a single currency, and quarterly gold revaluation changes, and they'll recognize the signature of a system running out of credible policy options. Markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. But markets cannot remain irrational longer than mathematics permits. Paper currencies can be printed. Solvency cannot. Look at the euro note in your pocket, the one signed by Christine Lagarde. That signature is a promise. The promise is that this piece of paper represents stable purchasing power backed by the full faith and credit of 19 sovereign nations. But faith is not a balance sheet item. Credit is not a monetary policy. When Target 2 balances exceed 1 trillion euros and settlement gets restructured to accept commodity-backed alternatives, the promise is already being rewritten. When emergency liquidity becomes permanent and German gold gets repatriated to Frankfurt, the system is already acknowledging that paper promises may not be enough. This is not prediction. This is observation of mechanisms already in motion. The imbalances have accumulated. The emergency measures are extending. The alternative systems are operational. The question is not if currency reset occurs. The question is, who understands what's happening before the mathematics force the adjustment? The divergence between paper currency promises and physical asset reality is not a market inefficiency. It's physics reasserting itself in monetary policy, a reminder that printed promises and accumulated imbalances eventually meet the immovable object of mathematical solvency.